I don't know if you've heard the story about the frog and the scorpion. For those who haven't, I'll repeat it. The scorpion is just making his way one day, and he comes across a stream, and the scorpion can't swim. And he's a bit frustrated with this until he sees a frog also arrive at the edge of the stream. And he says to the frog, "Look, will you give me a lift on your back so I can get to the other side of the stream?" The frog says, "No way. You'll sting me and kill me. I know what you are." And the scorpion says, "No, I promise I won't. I will not sting you, because obviously if I sting you while you're swimming across the stream and I'm on your back, then I'm going to die as well, because you'll sink and I'll go down with you. So no, I'm not going to sting you." So the frog lets the scorpion climb on its back, and it goes swimming across the stream. Halfway across the stream, the scorpion stings the frog, and as the frog's dying, it said, "But you said that you wouldn't sting me, and now you're going to die." And the scorpion says, "Yes, but I'm a scorpion, and that's what I do." It's a really good little fable to illustrate the nature of the fact that we're all born with a certain character. And this is a word that Schopenhauer uses, the word character. It's a bit kind of old-fashioned these days, but I think most people would acknowledge that the people they know have a certain character. They may be mean, they may be generous, they may be empathic, they may be indifferent. There are these kind of character traits. Now, these days they perhaps explain those in terms of environmental issues, in terms of genetics. Well, I don't really care what origin for these things people give them. I think we all understand that certain people are kind and certain people are cruel, for example. There are environmental issues, and I'll get those to those later. But Schopenhauer is in strong agreement with a lot of other people who've commented on this. Spinoza said, a cat cannot become a lion. You can't expect someone who's maybe weak and timid to become some brave adventurer. They're two different kind of things. So, I want to cover Schopenhauer's treatment of character, because fundamentally Schopenhauer believed that character was like a core essence within us. It's not something that can change. And in fact, to try and change your character is an act of violence against yourself. It's futile anyway. So someone who's a liar, say, to try not to become a liar, they will lie to themselves about not becoming a liar. So this whole thing of character is, in my opinion, quite illuminating. So let's get on to what Schopenhauer says. Another way of putting it is, lepers don't lose their spots. If someone's a liar, they're always going to be a liar. But more on that later as well. Now, I need a little bit of background for this, because if you know anything about Schopenhauer, you'll know that his fundamental philosophy on life was that the real part of us, the part that is, in his view, indestructible, although that's speculation as far as I'm concerned, is the will, our will. And again, many philosophers have said this, and many modern philosophers are saying the same thing. This drive to survive is the main manifestation of the will. This drive to continue with our existence. But it manifests in all kinds of shades and colours. As I say, some person might be very empathic, somebody else might be totally unsympathetic. So this thing of the will is really important to grasp. the essence of you, the very thing that defines you, is the will. The will to continue existing, the will to find a mate, the will to make money, the will to eat, all these things that ultimately always go back to survival in some shape or form, or survival and reproduction. And he says the will as the thing in itself. Now, there's a bit of context around that as well. The thing in itself is a term that Kant used to refer to the reality within us. Kant didn't use it exactly in that context, although Schopenhauer does. The thing in itself is reality. We don't know reality because we see the world through very strong filters, through time and space, causality, and a whole pile of stuff like that. So the thing in itself is the ultimate reality. Schopenhauer considered that the will is the ultimate reality. It's not something I personally agree with, but it doesn't detract from the fact that there's a lot of good insight to be got from this. So the will as the thing in itself constitutes the inner, true, and indestructible nature of man. Yet in itself it is without consciousness. As far as Schopenhauer is concerned, this will, this driving force, and it's to see it as a force is a very good way to understand it. This force within us is unconscious and unconscionable. It has no awareness of what it's doing. It's almost like the force of gravity. The force of gravity has no consciousness. And in fact, as far as Schopenhauer is concerned, gravity is as much a part of this will as the will that manifests through sentient beings to want to survive. So the will as a thing in itself constitutes the inner, true, and indestructible nature of man. Yet in itself it is without consciousness. You have to remember that Schopenhauer was heavily influenced by the Upanishads, by Immanuel Kant. In fact, he saw himself as a continuation of Kant. And he was heavily influenced by Eastern traditions. And, well, without digressing too much, this indestructible part of ourselves is this will. And the will it manifests through individual things like me and you and dogs and cats and whatever. But actually it's one thing. What in some traditions they would call the self, not self in the sense of I got a self, you've got a self and all the rest of it, but the self, the thing that is behind all phenomena. So, hopefully you've got that. That for Schopenhauer, the will is a thing in itself. It is the ultimate reality of what we are. And here's the thing. The will manifests itself in diverse forms, and within human beings, as Schopenhauer would say, from the brute through to the genius. All shades and colours of manifestation. Spinoza said the same thing. He said there's no shortage, or nature knows no shortage, to be able to manifest in all kinds of ways. So you will be a particular, as far as Schopenhauer is concerned, you will be a particular aspect of this will. And that aspect may be that you're very kind, or it may be that you're very cruel, or that you're a liar, or you're a cheat, or that you're extremely intelligent, or whatever. But it's all the one will. It's like the will can be likened to the electricity supply. Electricity supply goes through food processors, washing machines, dishwashers, TV sets. The appliances effectively manifest that will in different ways. So, if you are a particular aspect of this will, a particular shade and hue of this will, then you will manifest in a particular way, and that is not something you can change. You're born with it. Now, in modern day parlance, they would say that your genetics might determine a lot of it. But it doesn't really matter what kind of scientific explanation you put on it. You will find that people have particular traits, and it's impossible for them to change them. So, Schopenhauer is very firm on this. He says the traits of character make their appearance and last for life. That was his strong belief. Now, I'm an old guy. I have enough experience to know that someone who was a cheat 20 years ago will almost certainly still be a cheat. In fact, they will be a cheat. They can't help it. A liar will always be a liar. So, someone who's cheating on his or her partner is probably someone you shouldn't trust. A personal relationship in a marriage or a long-lasting relationship, that kind of relationship is probably the most intimate relationship most people know. If they're prepared to cheat on that person, it says quite a lot about that person. That they're a cheat, and they will probably always be a cheat. And if they're boasting about their affairs or whatever, you should take that as a warning sign that they're just as likely to cheat on you as anybody else. I've seen this many times in my life. Someone who, in fact I knew someone who, first time I met him, he was busy phoning a restaurant saying that the meal that he had there had caused food poisoning in his family. It hadn't. He was just lying. He wanted a free meal there. And so the restaurant eventually came around saying, well, look, let us make it up to you, because he was threatening to go to the health and safety people. They said, well, let us give you another meal. And so he got a free meal. It was a cheat. And then I knew him for a decade or so. And right throughout that decade, he was cheating in almost every interaction he had with people, including me. So character doesn't change. And so someone who's a thief will always be a thief. Unfortunately, most of us have these kind of traits. To try and change them, forget it. It's not going to happen. So someone who's boasting to you about the fact that they've just sold their house to someone and managed to get away with the fact that the foundations are crumbling or something, someone who's cheated in that kind of way, is someone you should be wary of, because in their dealings with you, they're likely to cheat you in some kind of way. So somebody who's empathic, compassionate, if you see that behavior, then that's a good sign that that's the way they're going to behave towards you if ever you needed their help or whatever. Of course, the illusion we have is that we can change our character, our fundamental traits, and we can't. Now, unfortunately, we find it almost impossible to be honest with ourselves. And in fact, again, this is something that Schopenhauer talks about. The way the will manifests is largely below our level of apprehension, below our level of consciousness. He gives an example. You set out on some project. You're not really sure whether you want to do it or not. You can see some advantages from it, but you can also see some dangers and whatever else, and maybe a lot of hard work. And one day you get news that something has changed and you can't do the project. And you will know then, at that moment in time, whether you really wanted to do it or not, because you will either be disappointed or relieved. But up until that point, you will be telling yourself all kinds of lies. Well, I really want to do this. This is going to change my life, blah, blah, blah. And yet, when some event occurs where you can no longer do that thing, and you feel relief, then at that moment, you can see that you are lying to yourself. But you will always lie to yourself. We all lie to ourselves. The will is kind of hidden beneath a layer of conditioning. We can't really see what's going on down there. Now, the main message here is that if you want to deal effectively with people, you have to have a look at their current and past behavior. Not rumour about what they are or what they've done, but actually observe their behavior and understand the way they behave and act. So this guy that I knew who'd cheated this restaurant out of a free meal, I should have known there and then that that guy was a cheat and he was always going to cheat, and I should have kept well clear. I didn't. And he was very good at conning people. Very charming, all that kind of stuff. So you can learn how to deal with people by observing discrete events. Has this person lied? Have they cheated? Have they been sympathetic towards that person? Do they steal? There are traits in people that come from environmental conditioning. So, for example, someone who's been in a very violent environment, for example, may well develop a very strong sense of fear and aggression. And in neurological terms, it's the amygdala that does this kind of thing in the brain. And the amygdala can grow in size, and so the person becomes very highly attuned to fear and aggression. But there are things like that. But ultimately, I think in terms of character traits, we're just looking at whether a person is honest, kind, those kind of things, or a liar or a cheat, and those kind of things. And as far as Schopenhauer is concerned, you can no longer change those, you cannot change those traits any more than a leopard can lose its spots. Or the scorpion, which I started with in this, can resist stinging something that was sporting it in water and then dying because it's stung the frog. So even though it may mean death, a person cannot stop behaving in the way that they are at the very root of them manifesting.